I don't have a typical video for you this week because I spent the last week volunteering at a day camp where I grew up. I went to this camp as many years as I could from about the time I was 9 to the time I was 18 and about to go to college. It's not far from where I grew up. It was a day camp with one optional overnight, so it wasn't a total nature immersion, but it still was one of my first tastes of doing stuff in the outdoors. Remember when I wrote my bucket list? I actually knew I was going to volunteer at this camp, so that's why I put volunteer on the list. But if it didn't work out or something, I was still gonna do it, but that's where the idea came from. I also cooked over a fire at camp. We made quesadillas in tinfoil, and this was for lunch because it's a day camp and it was 90 degrees. Oh my goodness. So I still need to swim somewhere pretty, camp somewhere I paddled to. Oh, I did return to the Shell Towie Trace. I haven't done vintage backpacking yet, and I need one more local beer after an adventure. When I was paddleboarding, I had lightning kugels, because that's what they had at the gas station near there, and I was like, nah, that doesn't count, I need somewhere local. And returning to camp was just, oh, so cool. I was very pleasantly surprised that it was pretty much the same. It was still laid out the same way, I remembered where everything was. The feeling of being there was the same. What's new is that they had Gaga Ball now, which is a game that's very popular with kids nowadays if you don't know. It involves an octagon. There's a better slide at the pool. It went from being kind of a rickety, narrow slide to a fully enclosed, much more stable slide. Most kids are more familiar with archery now. That hasn't really surprised me. It did become popular over the years. One of the activities they do is creek walking. And when I went to camp there, you really just walked in a creek, and if you happen to see fish, if you happen to see a turtle, cool. Otherwise, it was just getting cool on a hot summer day. But nowadays, they have actual nets and buckets that you can catch crayfish or little minnows with, and I'm like, that is so cool. That's such a more fun idea than just walking in a creek. And while there are only 2 people that I recognized from my time there, the type of people there is really the same. I worked with 4th and 5th graders, and that's the age where you're starting to kind of push boundaries, and you might form really close friendships, but you don't want someone else trying to enter your friendship. And that's just the way that age always is. You know, I was worried, like, are the kids gonna mention a lot of like pop culture stuff or ask, oh, I wish I had my iPad here. And I'm like, that is so silly of me to think. These kids are expecting camp, you know. Also, kind of going hand in hand with that, there are teenagers that help out at this camp. At the end of the day, it's supposed to be about taking care of the kids and making sure they have a good time at camp. But what if these teenagers sort of make me feel embarrassed or really self-conscious? And the same thing happened, that I was just thinking stereotypes and not expecting camp people, you know? But speaking of how the people have changed / stayed the same, I'm a much different person than I was at 18, and I stopped going to camp there because I started spending my whole summers as a counselor and then as a camp admin. That's what I wanted to do as a career before I started YouTube. And so now going back, I hate to say it in these words, but a bit of the magic wasn't the same, because now I know accreditation standards, I know site management, I know behavior management, I know camper retention tactics, and just I've seen behind the scenes too much for it to seem like, oh, this is all just magically coming together to form a wonderful experience. That being said, though, it still meant the world for me to be there, just like it meant the world for me to be there as a kid. And because of camp, that kind of catapulted me on to adventures for the rest of my life. Because I knew it was possible for me to live outside for an extended amount of time, I wasn't afraid to try to hike the AT. Because I knew I could try to do things untraditional ways, I could live without conveniences, I wasn't afraid to try to live in a van. Because I could go to new places where I didn't know anyone, didn't really know what to expect, I knew I could try to travel internationally. And because all of these things that camp gave me, I've been able to go on so many amazing adventures throughout my life. I worked my way through the ranks to have a camp career, but then going back to do a job that was volunteer, it was just being with the kids all the time, that really brought me back to my roots. Camp has given me so much, and I was really glad to give back. Thanks so much for letting me share about this. If you have a story or an early memory of how you started to fall in love with the outdoors, please let me know in the comments. See you next time.